As a reminder, this video covers how the supernatural capabilities of the playable characters in the game Eternal Return originate and are made possible by the information from the series' first game, Immortal Soul. Episode 1 showcased how we got here, but the intricacies and the documentation of the test subjects reveal the fruits of their labor, both juicy and rotten. Let's begin with the reason why the game is called Eternal Return. Test subjects are technically no longer biologically human. Found in Immortal Soul's research records, it is revealed that test subject cells have zero traces of human cells, but instead have been replaced with Aglaya's product of their research, known as ARCH cells. The ARCH is an acronym name for the 4 cells that function in different roles. To make a heavily biologically jargon post quicker, each cell type can be classified as such. A as the production factory, R is the factory workers, C is the distributor, and D is the product. ARCH cells operate so that when it comes to the reproduction of a test subject, it is not that the body is regenerating, but it's actually returning to the body's original state. So long as the brain is undamaged, this process goes smoothly. These cells, once cleaned and free of any non-ARCH cell entities, will then regrow cells back to this test subject, bringing them once more to life as a whole. It is very important for this stage to be not only compromised of only ARCH cells, because as discovered in the first episode, this function can be interfered with and completely ceases when a non-ARCH entity is included. This means debris, shrapnel, poison, or whatever can enter the structure and disrupt the return process. This is actually an intended design flaw by the researchers, as then live test subjects cannot simply just put their dismembered limbs back together, as the sanitary means is reliant as Aglaya's cleanup. For any Project Moon fans watching, it is very similar to a certain train in Library of Ruina, an amazing Korean game. It's one of my all-time favorite games. Back to Eternal Return, this also canonically explains why damage still motivates test subjects during experimentation, because they will still face consequences and disadvantages like a normal human body may run into, all for the sake of Aglaya being able to control test subjects. ARCH cells also mean that while still vulnerable to wounds, test subjects are not fragile, and are actually still able to achieve supernatural feats because of the ARCH cells. Test subjects are enhanced in their capabilities, like strength, agility, memorization, and stamina. So being able to uproot large trees or destroy buildings is actually an easy task for a test subject. One example is that they can put themselves into a deep rest, which is a state that allows them to heal quicker over time, and recover from any fatigue that they have in just 2 to 3 hours. This actually means that the in-game action of resting is canonized. Now that we know that test subjects are comprised 100% of a manufactured cell known as ARCH, these bodies still need a way to function and get the blood pumping. This in-game is known as VF, or aka Vital Force. VF is actually said to be part of the world around us. Humans are just too mundane with almost no means to utilize it normally. This tidbit is also the one thing that is shared across both Immortal Soul and Eternal Return. All of Episode 1 was made with my resources having zero mention of VF, and while it was in Immortal Soul, it seems that it was written in the universe midway. This is not to say that it's completely shoehorned into the universe, because we know ARCH cells cannot function till it is without unknown entities. I believe it is plausible that researchers were able to create a second product thanks to their infinite funding and backing. They had the minds and technological power to make this reality, and with this, the second product would replace the red blood cells us normal humans have. And then this would fill the gap and become the blood of test subjects. This would also explain that as another manufactured product made symbiotic to ARCH cells, it can also be manipulated into objects like weapons, accessories, and items that we have in the game. It is at least said that all test subs have some sort of connection to VF, and with it now literally part of their body via blood, they can canonically manipulate VF in the environment to their desired bidding. This is why our characters are more than just enhanced bodies, but also with abilities that would have been fantasized as magic or miracles. With both of these in mind of what's inside a test subject, there is still the dynamic of power between test subjects and their overlord researchers. Visible in in-game records, and as well as what we have from Immortal Soul, we have a bracelet designed, manufactured, and managed by Aglaya's nanorobotics team. This is going to be showcased by a staff character, Dr. S, who proudly explains the functionality of the bracelet. Known as the bracelet in Immortal Soul, or confusingly in modern Eternal Return, a regeneration cuff or regen cuff. Even though we know that test subjects don't regenerate, they return. This bracelet contains and protects the test subject's arch cells, meaning that it is where the process of putting a visceral corpse back together. The cuff begins remaking the body once activated. It is worth noting that the cuff is screwed into the body of the test subject, and it does not conflict with the arch cell body. In fact, it is actually considered a natural part of the whole package. However, it is still quite unnerving to look at. It is quite obvious and visible that this cuff is screwed into and through your wrist. A scary sight to both those unfamiliar with its function and the test subject themselves. There are two important countermeasures within the cuff. If the cuff is attempted to be removed by force, the test subject is shut down by the cuff and put into a temporary but Aglaia-controlled vegetative state. The other is that it has an interaction with restricted zones. There is an in-game mechanic as well as canonized reason for the island which, day by day, night by night, designates a certain location on Lumia Island known as a red zone, or aka a restricted area. It is written that a test subject is also inhabited with a reactive specialized substance that is mundane until it is triggered. The trigger is the cuff. Whenever a cuff and its wearer are inside a red zone, a ticking timer that counts down to 0 will notify the wearer. If the wearer does stay in a red zone when the timer hits 0, the cuff will trigger the special substance and cause a chemically reacted explosion from inside the body, thus killing the wearer. This is still safe for Aglaia, as they have the capability to rebuild test subjects back together, even if on the off chance that pieces are missing or the brain was damaged. One detail, admittedly, that doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things is that what if the limb that holds the cuff is dismembered? A test subject could enter a red zone with no cuff thanks to this detail. In-game and in several official artworks, there is only one cuff on a person. In a realistic and efficient world, there would be a cuff on each limb, including the neck. However, that would aesthetically awful and annoying moving forward artistically, because every new skin and every single test subject would need to have at least a minimum of 5 standard cuffs discernible on their person. I believe canonically they would have multiple cuffs, which would also efficiently speed up the return process from 5 different areas instead of just starting from the same wrist over and over again. But this is just an acceptable thing to shrug off as a minor nitpick because the positives outweigh the negatives. These bracelets were not perfect upon their creation. The explosion reaction and the use it had with the red zones were not a thing when Aglaia began their first ever experiment. I will dedicate an entire episode purely to the first experiment, but just know that in present day Eternal Return, it came from the building blocks made in the in-game universe years from 2001 to 2004. Thanks to the lessons of their first attempt, as well as the continual monitoring of the first test subjects, who are still a part of the island to the present day, they've learned in tackling these known issues with further advancements in technology. Proudly explained by a staff member, Dr. S., shares that they have backup cells for each and every single test subject that they have, as well as a specialized storage for their memories just in case the brain of a test subject does indeed become damaged. In collaboration with Aglaia's psychological and psychotherapy team, test subjects are unknowingly safe from losing their past selves. However, there is greater control in Aglaia's hands with nanotechnology and brains. Their technology is the equivalent of a video editing program where they can quite literally edit and remove memories at their discretion. The point is that Dr. S believes that they can eventually find and fix the issue of memory loss when a test subject returns. They currently edit out traumas from memories, which matches their design philosophy that a perfect immortal being can no longer experience both physical and mental pain. So while they currently had not achieved this, they maintain this ideal by deleting compromising memories. This could mean that test subjects during an experiment that shared a meal together will remember such an event, but will have gaps in their memory of times of climactic negativity, such as death, betrayal, or other traumatic things. This is supported by voice lines that can be heard in-game, with characters that struggle to recall something that happened in a somehow familiar location. Almost all test subjects have this quality of forced amnesia. There is one group that can be considered the exception to this, and a mark of failure to Aglaia's research. Discovered both in-game and in Eternal Return's one of 2 official manhwas, Black Survival, Black Survival is a 12-chapter long comic, with its first half showcasing the life of a test subject during experimentation, and as well as the last half that tells the story of the first ever experiment. It is this group under Aglaya's first attempt at the Battle Royale experiment that issues occurred, comparable to bug fixes and patch notes for the game. The first batch of test subjects could still remember their experience, trauma and all, while Dr. S's team could still manipulate and edit these test subjects on return. Due to a test subject's arch cell enhancement, like better memory, they could overcome these edits and piece together their memories when seeing anything that was familiar to their experience. Once their memory was triggered, their traumas would flood back to them at an almost instant, rendering a first ever test subject to go crazy. Each time this happens, Dr. S is forced to return the test subject's brain, and as well as has to order his entire team to go ahead and remove the recollection source from the environment in hopes to prevent a repeat. This will be a seemingly forever occurrence, as the first batch of test subjects are capable of perfectly remembering for decades. In particular, there are 2 test subjects from the first batch that retained a very notable change of outcome compared to the rest of the first batch, which managed to assimilate back to the present day cast. And there we have it. At the end of the episode, you'll have hopefully learned the power behind test subjects, the mechanics of their experimentation, and what comprises it all to be a controlled scenario thanks to the efforts of Aglaya. Okay. With that, I can finally proceed to the origin of the characters, as well as the origin as to why I cared about Eternal Return in the first place. So, I guess this would be me returning to where it all began.